Hello and welcome back to the 8th episode of Let's Talk Headlines. I'm your host, Jay, and this is The Objective. I just want to thank you for tuning in today for another show of Let's Talk Headlines. I'm really excited to get this information out to you folks. And I know it's been a little while since the 7th episode, but I've really been, just sitting back and taking in all that has been transpiring over these last few days, and it has been a lot. Now, typically, if you guys listen to my shows, you know this, but I try to keep my podcast within 10 to about 15 minutes tops. Today, I will apologize to you. I may possibly go over. There's just a lot of information here, and I want to be able to get through most of it, if not all of it, with clarity, because I think it's extremely important that this narrative get out. And I feel that the mainstream media is not being honest. It's not being honest at all. And I'm just hoping that this catches the ear of somebody who is interested in another point of view, in objectivity, who's not being manipulated and persuaded by a malicious agenda. On March 22, and by the way, it is March 27th, it's actually 2:45 a.m. right now. This was an article that I read, and I actually printed it out because I was blown away. It says here, this was March 22nd, 2017. On CNN, the title is U.S. Officials Info Suggests Trump Associates May Have Coordinated with Russians. And the thing that really caught my attention and actually kind of got my blood boiling was this. The first line in this article says, the FBI, listen closely, the FBI has information that indicates associates of President Donald Trump communicated with suspected Russian operatives to possibly coordinate the release of information damaging to Hillary Clinton's campaign, U.S. officials told CNN. Listen. The FBI has information that indicates associates, a very vague and ambiguous term, of President Donald Trump communicated with suspected Russian operatives to possibly coordinate the release of information damaging to the Hillary Clinton campaign. Now, if you just listen to that, you have words like associates, which are very ambiguous and vague, suspected, possibly. There is nothing concrete here and nothing that can be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. There are a lot of assertions, and these individuals actually call this report a bombshell announcement. Now, I don't know, call me crazy, but I would think that a bombshell announcement would be, we have conclusive evidence that President Donald Trump and his cabinet and his team, his associates have colluded with the Russians to undermine Hillary Clinton's campaign. That would be a bombshell announcement. But for them to consider this a bombshell announcement tells me as a civilian, it tells me as a consumer that they do not have a damn thing. And we're going to be looking at collusion today. It says here in another paragraph, in his statement on Monday, Comey said the FBI began looking into possible coordination between Trump campaign associates and suspected Russian operatives because the Bureau had gathered a credible, this is quotations, a credible allegation of wrongdoings or reasonable basis to believe an American may be acting as an agent for a foreign power. And we are still waiting for this credible allegation. We're waiting for the contents of whatever this allegation is. So they want to talk about collusion. I'm suggesting that we have more public knowledge, more information that can be actually accessed by the public. We have more things at our disposal in that regard than we will ever have in regards to President Trump's administration in collusion with the Russians. And it's so funny that this is the case, but for some reason, this story of Trump's collusion is getting such tremendous airtime and these silly articles that say associates and suspected Russian operatives to possibly coordinate. This is nothing that is conclusive, and they're calling this a bombshell. This is nothing that is solid, and you could just see them grabbing for threads right now. And right now I'm going to go over some of the evidence and the facts that we have and that are readily available to us if we just do our work to suggest that CNN is in collusion with Hillary in aiding her and undermining the Trump administration and campaign. Number one, Donna Brazile. Some of you may remember that name. She was the head of the Democratic National Committee and also a CNN contributor. And there were some emails that came out that suggested, well, not only suggested, but gave direct evidence that Donna Brazile had given Hillary Clinton debate questions prior to the debate. Now, when this came out, a lot of individuals are saying, well, how do we know those emails are real? How can we confirm those are real? They must have been altered in a way. Donna Brazile was asked by many reporters and on different stations, is this true? And she adamantly declined. But eventually, someone must have talked sense into her, or she may have understood the liability that she could have been if she was found lying. And she admitted to doing this and apologized for doing this. And to save face, she was consequently fired by CNN. You have Donna Brazile, the head of the Democratic National Committee, giving questions from a debate to one of the candidates before the debate. Number two, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She was appointed by President Obama, I think it was in 2011. And she was a chairman of the DNC. And some more emails, interestingly enough, it seems like news stations and news outlets, individuals who are supposed to be bringing truth and objectivity and center line, they're now covering up the truth. Whereas now hackers and comedians are the ones that are trying to bring truth to the forefront. Everybody has an agenda, it seems. So Debbie Wasserman Schultz, chairman of the DNC, emails suggested, and not only suggested, but gave evidence that the committee was actively trying to undermine Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. They were coming up with narratives that would be harmful and destroy the credibility of Bernie Sanders to the Democratic population. The function of the DNC and the RNC is to represent all candidates fairly. But in these emails, and they're, like I said, they're readily and openly available to the public, you can see that they're plotting and scheming against Bernie Sanders. They were trying to find ways that they can hurt his credibility in front of. Now, I'm not a Bernie Sanders fan. I don't support the guy. He's a unapologetic, openly bona fide socialist, and for that reason, amongst others, I don't agree with his policy. I don't agree with his philosophy. Therefore, I'm not a supporter of him. But in the same mind, that doesn't give me the green light to undermine him in a democratic process. And he's a candidate for my party. Chris Cuomo, I think I said that right. It's Cuomo. He admitted on live TV that CNN, he said, we could not help Hillary Clinton anymore. He admitted that they had given her a free ride. It's quoted. He said, we could not help her any more than we have. She just got a free ride so far with the media. Former CNN reporter Piers Morgan stated the reporting was outright anti-Trump, which essentially amounted to pro-Hillary propaganda. This is a former CNN reporter who is able to, and I'm not a fan of Piers Morgan, but it just goes to show that it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're standing on, to see this type of partisan bias, deceit, propaganda is disheartening, and it discredits the whole Western democratic process. I'm sure a rational person can look at that information, which is, again, I will say, readily available to them, and say, you know what, that is inappropriate. That isn't what characterizes a democratic process. That is essentially pushing an agenda. Who cares what the people want? We're going to put this into our hands. We're going to take this into our hands and push the candidate that we want. Screw our constituents. Screw them. This is who we want. This is the agenda that we have. A few weeks ago, President Donald Trump came out with a tweet, and he said something that caused a firestorm within the political realm. And he made a claim that President Barack Obama had wiretapped him. Now, you can call President Donald Trump crazy. You can call him a fool. You can call him a lot of things. But even if he is those things, you have to wonder what would did he just wake up one morning and say, you know what, I was wiretapped? You can have as much hate as you do for him, but being honest with yourself, you have to admit that waking up one day and saying, you know what, I was tapped by President Obama is a little silly. There obviously was some information that had been passed and divulged to him that would make him make a claim like that, an accusation like that. And there were hearings, there were congressional hearings, there were the news cycle was pretty much filled with CNN discrediting these claims, shooting them down before having any evidence. And this is why I say they have an agenda. Because not only were they reporting it, they were denying it. They were trying to bury it. I'm currently looking at a Vox News article, printed it out. This one's dated March 22nd, 2017, a few days old. But Devin Nunes, chair of the House Permanent Subcommittee on Intelligence, had a press conference that confirmed that information, including telecommunications from Donald Trump, were obtained via surveillance. Now, in light of this information, it was stated that there was a possibility that some surveillance information was gathered from Donald Trump incidentally. Now, this is the crux. This is the crux of everything. This is what's very interesting. Because first we went from President Donald Trump saying, Obama has wiretapped me. Then we go to complete denial from CNN, from a number of people on the left. Complete denial. And then now, magically, we have, okay, well, we incidentally have communication and information from surveillance on Donald Trump and his administration. Very interesting. So you may wonder, how? How did this take place? Well, for those of you that don't really understand warrants, search warrants, or anything like that, typically when obtaining a warrant, whether it's a warrant for information to wire, because you can't just wiretap people. You can't just simply say, you know what, that person looks suspicious. Let's tap their phone. Let's tap their communications. Let's Let's look at their itinerary, their travel plans. You can't just do that. In order to get a wiretap, you require a warrant. Whether it's a warrant for an arrest, whether it's a warrant for surveillance, whether it's a warrant to have police, for instance, search your house, you need to get a warrant. The crazy thing about warrants is that in order for a warrant to be obtained, a judge needs to pretty much sign off on it. Makes you raise some questions now, doesn't it? Well, you know what? There's actually a caveat here, because there is a special warrant that actually came to light. And it's actually a secret warrant. Plot thickens. And the warrant is actually called a FISA warrant, FISA warrant, we'll call it. And that stands for Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So what the FISA warrant, what FISA, the act itself, allows is for secret courts to issue surveillance warrants on non-Americans. Well, you may think Donald Trump is an American. You're absolutely right. He is. So how would they get a warrant, a FISA warrant on Donald Trump? How would they obtain Donald Trump's information from a FISA warrant? Well, there are two things that you have to know about a FISA warrant. Over the entire 33-year period that FISA warrants have been obtained and requested for, there were 33,942 warrants granted. Over that 33-year period, only 12 of them were denied. That's a rejection rate of 0.03% of the total requests. That's the first thing. The first things that you have to know is that when they are sought for, when they are requested, they are very rarely denied. The second thing you have to know is that there is little to no oversight. Once the warrant is obtained, the NSA basically has a free reign. This is from Glenn Greenwald, who published details on the PRISM surveillance program. He said that this entire process is a fig leaf. He says oversight in name only. It offers no real safeguards. That's because no court monitors what the NSA is actually doing when it claims to comply with the court-approved procedures. Once the FISA court puts its approval stamp on the NSA's procedures, there is no external judicial check on which targets end up being selected by the NSA analysts for eavesdropping. I'm going to say that again. There is no external judicial checks on which targets end up being selected by the NSA analysts for eavesdropping. The only time individualized warrants are required is when the NSA is specifically targeting a U.S. citizen or the communications are purely domestic. When it is time for the NSA to obtain a FISA court approval, the agency does not tell the court whose calls and emails it intends to intercept. It instead merely provides the general guidelines which it claims are used by its analysts to determine which individuals they can target. And the FISA court judge then issues a simple order approving those guidelines. Once the NSA, and I'm almost done here, has this court approval, it can then target anyone chosen by their analysts and can even order telecoms and internet companies to turn over to them the emails, chats, and calls for those targets. The FISA court plays no role whatsoever in reviewing whether the procedures it approved are actually complied with when the NSA starts eavesdropping on the. What I'm saying here, folks, is that there is little to no oversight once this warrant is approved. Not only are Democrats utilizing the media as an extension of its power and propaganda to push its agenda, but now we see the use and instrumentalities of the federal government to even go to the extent of surveilling the president of the United States, and then in return leak that information to try to destroy his credibility. There are no lengths that the left would go to push their agenda. And during a press briefing, Sean Spicer was asked he was asked questions about Nunes giving this information to the president. They asked, did he schedule the appointment? How did he get to the White House? Was there any foreknowledge of his coming? And Spicer got to the point where he said, you know what? It comes a point where it doesn't matter if he skateboarded or rollerbladed to the White House. There comes a point when you have to take a look at the information that is placed before you. Look at the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign. There's so much scandal, so many things that don't characterize a democratic government. Instead of people critiquing and outraging at the fact that a Democratic candidate, Bernie Sanders, was undermined by another Democratic candidate. That wasn't the outrage. The outrage was the fact our emails were leaked. Now what we're doing in the dark is now in the open. There's a point where you have to look at the information given before you. It's not a matter of being on the right. It's not a matter of being on the left. It's a matter of being, is this democratic? Is this what our Constitution embodies, and the rights and the process that have been put into place to ensure that our government is one of integrity and dignity? And ever since Hillary Clinton lost the election, the left is disgraced, and they're angry, and they will do whatever they can to try to discredit the Trump administration. So all I ask is that you watch the media with an objective eye. Do your research. Think for yourself. Because there are things and there are powers and there are agendas that are being played out that we as civilians and consumers will never see. I don't care if you're a liberal, I don't care if you're a Republican. All I care about is us making it our objective to be objective. Thank you so much and have a good day.